Chapter 3. Nate, a necessary treatment. The Rains family sat in their apartment, the sterile glow of Verosphere's artificial sky filtering through the wide windows. Everything was quiet until a soft chime echoed from the front door. Marcus glanced at Hannah, then at Nate, who was curled up on the couch, flipping through his phone. Hannah stood, smoothing her hands over her dress as she approached the door. When it slid open, Mrs. Everett stood on the other side. Composed, polished. "Good evening, Mrs. Rains," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Marcus straightened, immediately on edge. "Is there a problem?" Mrs. Everett smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Not at all. I've come to deliver an update regarding your son's treatment." Hannah felt Marcus tense beside her. They hadn't had an update on his treatment in some time, and they had thought he was completely in remission. Nate looked up from his phone, blinking at her. "Me?" "Yes, Nate." She turned toward him, her voice perfectly smooth. "You're aware of the custom in Verosphere, aren't you? How 16-year-olds start learning to do their own tasks?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I guess so." Mrs. Everett clasped her hands together. "That's wonderful to hear. The Director of Resource Management has reviewed your progress and determined that you're ready for the next step in your treatment plan." Hannah's pulse quickened. "The Director has assigned you a task list," Mrs. Everett continued, her tone effortless. "Starting tomorrow, you'll receive small, manageable tasks. For you, these tasks are to ensure you remain on track. Think of them as appointments, simple but important." Marcus took a step forward, his voice sharp. "That wasn't part of the arrangement. Is this really a good time? Do we have to worry about the cancer coming back?" Mrs. Everett turned to him slowly. "Oh, no, Mr. Rains. It is just the market is always evolving, Mr. Rains. The Director of Resource Management has made the decision to move forward with giving him tasks, mostly to further monitor his progress." Marcus exhaled through his nose. Hannah could see the fight in his posture, but Nate was watching. If this was from the Director of Resource Management, they had to be careful. Very careful. Hannah forced a polite smile, resting a hand on Marcus's arm before addressing Mrs. Everett. "What kind of tasks will there be?" Mrs. Everett's smile returned. "Nothing difficult, just small engagements to ensure his continued well-being. Things like reviewing informational content, confirming his wellness through guided self-assessments, and occasional pickups, just like a pharmacy visit." Nate shifted in his seat. "Like a doctor's appointment?" "Exactly." Mrs. Everett's gaze lingered on him. "Everything here is designed to help you. The market provides, doesn't it?" Nate swallowed, nodding. "Yeah." Mrs. Everett turned back to Hannah and Marcus. "I can tell this is difficult for you two, so we will allow you to see what his first task is and to follow up if needed." Tasks were meant to be private in the Verosphere, even for coming-of-age freemen. It was an exception, but it didn't make them feel much better. Marcus gave a small nod. "We appreciate that." Mrs. Everett adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. "You should be proud. After all, he is 16 now, and most kids his age start doing small tasks." Hannah's hands clenched into fists. She wasn't so sure this was an opportunity. It seemed more like a demand. Mrs. Everett gave a slight nod. "I'll let you review his first task when it arrives in the morning. If you have any concerns..." She paused, just enough to be unsettling, then smiled again. "You know where to find me." With that, she turned toward the door. It slid open seamlessly, and she disappeared into the corridor, leaving the room silent. Hannah turned back to Nate. He was staring at his phone, brow furrowed. "Mom," he asked quietly, "what happens if I don't do them?" Hannah didn't answer, because she didn't know. She had always finished her tasks. That evening, Hannah stood by the kitchen counter, running her fingers over the smooth surface as she absent-mindedly scrolled through shelf talk. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional soft ping from Marcus's phone and the gentle hum of the air filters cycling through the room. Nate was in his room, already curled up with his tablet. His first task would arrive in the morning. Hannah exhaled, feeling the tension in her chest refuse to ease. A soft knock at the door broke the silence. She blinked, exchanging a glance with Marcus before stepping forward and opening it. Marla Keene stood outside, her familiar smile warm and reassuring. "Evening, dear," she said, cradling a small basket of fresh fruit in her arms. "Thought I'd stop by. Haven't seen you much today." Hannah hesitated. It wasn't unusual for Marla to check in. She was the kind of person who looked out for everyone in their block, always offering a kind word or a thoughtful favor. But something about her timing made Hannah's skin prickle. "We had a visit from Mrs. Everett today," Hannah said slowly, watching Marla's reaction. Marla's pleasant expression didn't change. "Oh?" Hannah exchanged another glance with Marcus before continuing. "Nate's been given a task list, starting tomorrow." For a split second, Marla didn't move. Her fingers curled just slightly around the basket's handle. Then, as if catching herself, she let out a small, effortless laugh. "Oh, well, that's a big step for the little guy, isn't it?" she said lightly. "They must think he's ready for it." Hannah's stomach twisted. Something felt off. "They said it's part of his treatment," Marcus added, his voice measured. "Like appointments, just things to keep him on track." Marla nodded, her smile still in place. "All too perfect." "Of course," she said. "That makes sense." A silence stretched between them, brief but heavy. Then Marla reached over and gave Hannah's arm a gentle squeeze. "Just pay attention, okay?" she murmured, low enough that Marcus barely caught it. Hannah frowned. "What do you mean?" Marla blinked. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed over the moment with another soft laugh. "Oh, nothing. Just, you know me, always trying to make things better." She patted Hannah's arm and stepped back toward the door. "I should let you rest. It's late." Hannah and Marcus stood there, watching her leave, a quiet unease settling over the room. As soon as the door clicked shut, Marcus turned to Hannah. "Did that seem—" "Yes," she said immediately. They exchanged a look, neither willing to say what they were both thinking. "Just pay attention." What an odd thing to say. That night, as Hannah settled into bed, her phone vibrated softly against the nightstand. She reached for it, expecting another automated reminder. Instead, a notification pulsed on the screen in a format she'd never seen. It looked like it was code or something. It said, "Market link task complete. Assigned to Marla Keene. Task, provide emotional support to neighbor. Success." Hannah sat up, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a message. It was a task completion report. She stared at it, heart pounding. She barely questioned how she got it. She was more so mad to realize Marla hadn't stopped by out of kindness. She was following instructions. A moment later, the notification vanished, erased as if it had never existed. Hannah lay back down, staring at the ceiling, her unease deepening. Tomorrow, Nate's first task would arrive, and now she wasn't sure if she wanted to see what it was.